Hi, welcome to the Y&Y YouTube channel. My name is Angela and all of the places you can find me should be linked in the description box just below this video. Welcome to another Y&Y Extra video. I am about to start a new spin and I thought I'd take you with me through the process. It's going to be quite a long spin. I'm aiming to spin for a sweater, but I'm going to do something called a combo spin. So I thought I'd record my process as I go through, and it could be a little while before this video actually goes up in its entirety. I may sprinkle in bits into my usual weekly podcast, so there potentially might be bits in here that you've already seen before. As I'm recording this, it is the 12th of November and I'm just about to start my preparation for the spin. So I had the inspiration for this project. I was searching YouTube for spinning videos when I first started getting into spinning, and I came across a video by Tracy, who is the passionate spinner, and I'll link the video down below. And she shared her process for basically grabbing a bunch of single skeins of fibre or single braids of fibre from her stash and splitting them up and just spinning them all together to make a sweater project. So I'm going to go for that idea, and I've got a mix of different fibres, and yeah, I'm just going to see what happens. I have some mixed feelings about this project. I'm excited to try and spin for a sweater, but I have no idea how it's going to turn out, and there's a good chance that this could be a complete car crash and the yarn will be horrendous. But in Tracy's video she assures us that she's done it several times before and it always looks okay, so I am going on that basis. And worst case scenario, there will always be more fibre to buy, won't there? So next to me I have a basket full of fibre that I've pulled out of my stash. So I'm just going to lift that up and show you. So here we go, I've got a giant basket full of fibre, and basically I've been through my stash and I've pulled out braids and samples, and the unifying theme is they've all got some sort of orange or yellow colour to them. So I am going to just go through my basket now, note down what I've got before I start the spin. In Tracy's video, I think she starts with about 7 braids. She says she usually uses 700 grams for a sweater. She is a much smaller person than I am, so I'm aiming for 8 to 9 to give me some leeway to play with. But at the end of the day, whatever I come up with, I'm sure I will find something. And I love a good crop sweater, so worst case scenario, I will find a pattern that fits the yarn that I make. So yeah, we're going to start the process and see what happens. I've been sitting on this idea for a couple of weeks. That's for a couple of reasons really. The first one is I wanted to finish the current spin that I had on my wheel, and the second one is when I first sorted out my colours, I had a thought, or a fear I should say, that my colours might turn out a bit too pastel-y. I'm not really a pastels person. I like brights and jewel tones. And there was also one skein in my pile, and I'll show you the skein. It's this gorgeous skein of Corridale yarn, and this was kind of on top of my pile, and I absolutely love this skein. And it was a birthday gift from James. We went to Yorkshire this summer, and we went to Fairfield mill, and they have lots of small producers selling in the mill, and this was one of the braids of fibre that came home with me. And I think it was putting me off the spin because it was almost too precious to go into a project that I wasn't sure what the outcome would be. Does that make any sort of sense at all? I think these colours were what were leading me to think sort of pastels, even though they're not particularly pastels. But I think by the time we sort of start spreading the fibre out and spin, there could be a tendency for this to be on the more muted side. So I've decided to spin that separately on its own, because yeah, it's too beautiful just to go into a project that potentially just could result in yarn that looks muddy. So this one's going back into stash for a while and will become something beautiful in the future, I'm sure. So for now, because I have both braids and small sample bits of fibre, wow, that's really bright on the camera, isn't it? I'm going to weigh some of the smaller bits of fibre, see what I've got, and then I'm going to separate the rest of the braids down into hanks and bumps of about a similar weight. So I think I'm going to aim for maybe 10 10-15 grams of fibre in each little hank, and I'm going to note down what I've got as I go. I've weighed everything out and I've just about got a kilo of fibre, so even at a thicker weight yarn I'm hopeful that that should be enough to get what I need for my project. I'm hoping to knit the right angle cardigan, I think it's called. I'll put a link in the description box below, but I'm not set in stone with that. If I need to change it to match the quantity of yarn that I end up with at the end of the spin, then that's absolutely fine. So now I've got an idea of the overall amount of fibre in my basket, I can start splitting it down into different sections and just mix it all up in the basket ready to spin. I'm ready to get going with the next part of my spinning plan. So I'm sat on the floor in my craft room and I've spread out into piles all of the different fibres that I've got for my sweater spin. And the other day you saw me weighing out the fibres in their entirety, so I've added that to a notebook so I know how much I've got of each one. Now I'm going to try and split these braids and bumps down into sections that are of about the same weight, and I think I'm going to start with these little bumps from the shepherd's hut. So I think what I'm going to do, they're all about this sort of size, I'm going to draft one of these out and see how much fibre that gives me to determine whether I think I need to split these down in half. I want to start with my smallest quantity so that I can then split everything down into about that sort of quantity, and then I'm going to prepare them and start filling up my basket. So one of these little hanks from the shepherd's hut is about 8 grams. So what I think I'm going to do is just split the bigger braids down into sort of 8 to 10 gram hanks. This is really quite fun. I'm starting to pre-draft some of these bumps from the shepherd hut. This is a Corriedale yarn, I think. Let me just grab the label. Yeah, Corriedale, and this is the bumps as they've come out of the packet, and now I'm pre-drafting them, and look at the difference in the size. That just amuses me that we go from this tightly bored bundle to this lovely fluffy cloud. First batch is prepped. This is probably going to be the easiest, quickest batch to do because these were already in 8 to 12 gram little hanks, so the rest of the fibre needs to be weighed and split down into the same sort of quantities, so that will probably take me a little bit longer, but look, all that looks really pretty, doesn't it? I've finished prepping all of the little braids and bumps, so there's a nice big pile of fibre everywhere on the floor. So what I've got left now is the braids. I've started on the first braid. I'm not entirely sure what the fibre content is, but this fibre is lovely and soft. I won it on a spin along that was hosted by Chanel of the Pipe and Nail podcast. So I have basically split the braid in half. This is one half. The first half is about 60 grams, so I have now split that half down into 2/3, and I'm going to pull these thirds apart. Again, let me try and, so I'm just going to grab, I've got 2 here, so I don't know how well it's going to work, but I'm just going to pull them apart, and that should leave me with 6 pieces of roughly 10ish grams, and I'm just going to pre-draft those and pop those into a pile, as I've done with the other little bumps of fluff that I've already prepared. I have the second half of my braid here, so I thought I'd show you a bit better what I'm actually doing. So I want to split this big long strand that I have into thirds, so I am just going to roughly fold it into 3 equal parts. Might take a little bit of jigging around. There you go, you can see I've got 3 strands there, and then I'm just going to break it at the sort of curves of those joins. This one doesn't want to break. I'm going to spread that out a little bit. There we go. And then, because I know this is 60 grams, I'm going to then take each of these bits and roughly fold them in half again and pull them apart. As you can see, I'm not being super consistent. I have no idea how this spin's going to turn out. So yeah, I'm not being too fussy about quantities and how it goes, because it's all a big experiment. I've moved on to prepping this braid from Wriggle Fingers, which is Southdown fibre. I've not used it before, and it's one of the reasons I picked this up. I think I got it from Wonderwall, not this year but the previous year. And this fibre is really interesting. It's really quite spongy in comparison to the other things that I've drafted. So I know there's Corriedale, Merino, I think there's a Merino bamboo mix in the things that I've already prepared. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see whether I can spin this up at the same sort of consistency as the other fibres. But if I can't, then I'll probably just take it out of the basket and spin it separately. But yeah, it's really interesting, really kind of stretchy and spongy in comparison. So I'm excited to give this a spin and see what it comes out like. I'm working on prepping my last braid of fibre, and it's this beautiful colourway from Captain Sparrow. It's the only one of my braids that I've pulled out of my stash that's got the blue in. Everything else is more sort of yellow, orange, there's some sort of pinky, purpley tones and a little bit of green. But I've decided, when I unravelled this braid, there's sort of long strips of blue and then sort of like the mix with the sort of rusty parts. And I was a bit afraid that if I split it, just breaking it horizontally like I've been doing with the other braids, that I'd end up with big chunks of blue that I'm not sure will necessarily marry as well with the rest of the fibre. So just for this braid, I'm actually going to be splitting the braid vertically. So I'm just pulling it apart in sort of really long narrow strips. So this is half of the braid, I've already done half, and then I'm splitting those bits down once more into 4 finer strips, and so that means each piece of this fibre is going to have a little bit of the blue in, so I'm hoping that might be a better way to deal with that particular braid in this spin. And this is the last one that I'm working on, so in a minute I'll be able to show you my big pile of fibre. James just stuck his head up here and he just, well, rolled his eyes and walked away because this room is a complete mess at the moment. I've got yarn on the floor over in the corner from my London trip, which is waiting for me to photograph it and put it into stash. I've got this massive pile of fibre that I've been prepping this morning. So yeah, there's basically no floor space up here at the moment. Okay, so this is it, guys. Check out all of this fibre. Prepped and ready to go. So my next task is going to be to randomly grab chunks of fibre and chuck them in the basket, and I'm going to try and pick from different piles as I go, so that it's well and truly mixed up in that basket. so that I will be randomly picking when it comes to spinning. All this fibre makes a great pillow. After this hard work, maybe it's time for a nap. I have spun up my first 2 partial bobbins of the spin that I'm working on. I'm taking pause a little bit on the project because I'm not sure if I want to proceed in the same manner that I've been working. As I started spinning, I was pulling random bumps of fluff out of my basket, and I realised I'd veered off slightly from the process that the passionate spinner uses in her videos. She's starting her spin with full braids, like 100-gram braids of several different fibres, where I've got little sort of bumps and pieces of mine, and I've broken my full braids down into small pieces. So it occurred to me that, so I've got one of my bobbins here, and I've got 3 different types of fibre on this bobbin already, and as you can see, it's nowhere near full. And it occurred to me that maybe this wouldn't be the best approach for trying to come up with a harmonious yarn, because I'm going to have loads of different types of fibre plied with loads of other different types of fibre, and it could look a bit messy. So I've spun 3 little bumps, so there's probably around 25-30 grams of fibre on there. So if we could, before I went any further, I'd just stop there and spin another bobbin of the same amount. And so this one's still on my flyer. I've just popped this off my wheel. And you can see the bobbins are quite different in look. So I'm going to apply these together and see what they look like. On this one, I've got some merino, some south down, and also I think a merino and bamboo blend. On this one underneath, which you can't see, I've got a BFL. This bright one is merino, and then this one here is Shetland. So I'm going to apply those together and see what they look like, to see whether they're just a complete mess, basically. So if I don't like the look of the yarn, then I might just backtrack slightly, and instead of pulling out random bumps of fibre from my basket, I might spin up whole bobbins of the same fibre. So I might just separate these back out again, grab all of the Shetland, fill up a bobbin, maybe, you know, grab a bobbin of south down, fill up another bobbin, and just ply those 2 together. So there's only ever sort of 2 fibres mixing together, rather than a mix of sort of short runs of, you know, maybe 7 or 8 different runs of fibre on each bobbin. So yeah, that's the plan. So I'm going to start plying these together, and then I'll wash the skein and maybe even knit a swatch with it, see what I get as to whether I continue in this vein where I'm just doing little samples, or if I sort of backtrack and make a different plan. The light is terrible today. I'm hanging out in my kitchen because this is the best light I could find in the house. But I finished plying the yarn. As you can see, it's spread out on my niddy noddy, and actually it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. So next step is to wash it and see how the different fibres behave. In this one little skein, there's at least 4 different fibres. There's some merino, there's some Shetland, there's some BFL, and what else? Oh, some Southdown. So I just want to wash this skein and see how the different fibres behave together. If they're okay, then I think I'm just going to go for it. There was a really obnoxious peachy colour in here that I was worried about, but by the time it's been plied with something else, it's really not too bad at all. So yeah, at the moment, I'm erring on the side of going with my original plan, but I guess final decision will be made after I've washed this skein. It's been a couple of weeks since I have recorded any segments for my combo spin video. I think I want to wrap up the video for now. I've been spinning away. I'm quite pleased with the results that I've been getting. I think the last time I chatted to you, I was about to ply my yarn on the sample that I have spun up. And so this is the yarn that I got from that sample spin. Apologies for the light, it's a very grey, rainy day. You might even be able to hear the rain in the background here. I'm doing my best. So this was my first sample skein, which I think is about 30 grams of fibre, if I remember rightly. So if I just undo it, there's lots of lovely barber poling as expected and as I wanted really from this spin. And obviously the colours sort of gradiate depending on what colours were plied together. And that's really random because I'm just picking the colour bumps out of my fibre basket just as they come really. So I've got, in this one I've got a nice sort of streak of green. Not really showing out, there we go, that's a bit better. A nice streak of green and obviously lots of oranges and some reds as well. So yeah, I was really pleased with this. This one's definitely got a nice autumnal feel. So it gave me the confidence just to carry on and work my way through the rest of the basket. Obviously that's going to take quite some time. I think there's about 1 kilo of fibre if I remember rightly. Total so far I've managed to spin up about 300 grams including that initial sample skein. And these are the 2 other skeins that I have spun up. And as you can see, if I grab the sample skein again, all 3 are definitely related, but they all have their differences. But I'm completely thrilled with how the spin is coming out. Much better than I thought. Not so much muddying and not so many patches in the spin that I don't like. I was afraid that there'd be certain colours that came together that I wasn't really fond of. There are certainly areas that I like more than others, but overall I think they're fairly cohesive. I think they look like they go together, even though in each hank of yarn there'll be different combinations of different fibres. Some are a little bit brighter, some are a little bit darker. I've got these lovely streaks of blue as well coming through. But yeah, I think I will be able to make a nice, fun, colourful sweater out of those. The biggest challenges that I think I've faced so far is, although I think I chatted about it on one of my weekly episodes, or maybe even in this video, the Southdown fibre is quite spongy, and when I initially spun it I was able to spin it at a relatively consistent thickness compared to the other fibres that I was spinning, but as I've got going with it I seem to have lost that ability and it seems to want to be spun quite finely, so I'm finding it a real challenge to spin that at the same consistency as the other fibres, but I'm just going to go with it. This whole spin is a complete experiment. As you know, I want to try and spin for a sweater, and it's going to be a really fun, lots of colours, and so I don't mind lots of textures in my sweater either. So I'm just going to go with it as a fun experiment and see what I get really. The other thing that has happened that I hoped wouldn't is in this hank of yarn here, you can see there's this one sort of stripe of a solid colour where 2 of the same fibres got plied together. I'm not keeping track of what I spin in what order on each bobbin, because that would just be too complicated. I want this to be a really fun, loose spin. I don't want to do any management really. I could take the time to, you know, sit and work out what goes on each bobbin so things don't come together, but I don't want it to be like that. I want it to be a bit more free. I was hoping things like that wouldn't happen, but of course there's always a chance that they will, and it did on that occasion. It's only one little patch, but I think in a sweater knit where everything else is mild and fun, I think that might stand out as a sort of solid section or a solid stripe in the garment. So when it comes to knitting, whatever I decide to knit, I may end up cutting out that bit of fibre, just managing that slightly. The other thing that I may do, my big bumps of yarn here are actually 2 hanks twisted together, because I can't apply all of this onto one bobbin. My bobbins for my Haldane are really small. So once I have spun all of my yarn, I might just separate out the hanks and have a look at them all in their entirety, and maybe sort of lay them out so that I think they mix well together in the knitted project. We'll see. I'm not sure if I want to be that fussy or if I'm just going to go for it and knit. So yeah, overall I'm really pleased. I'm definitely going to carry on with this spin. I love all of the colours. I guess that's the trick really, is pulling out braids of fibre. If you're going to have a go at this, pulling out braids of fibre from your stash that you really love. And I think it was Vicky who asked me about muddying. She said she tried a combo spin, but it hadn't really worked. There are definitely some areas where the colours kind of mix together in a nice, bright, fun, poppy way, and there are other areas where they do sort of dull down and muddy a little bit, I guess. But in this spin where I've got so many colours, I don't think it really matters. The video that I followed, I mentioned it at the start, Tracy, who is the Passionate Spinner, she recommends that you pick braids of fibre from your stash that have some sort of colour commonality to them. And I don't know, Vicky, because I haven't seen your spin, but maybe you pick too many colours, if that makes sense. I mean, I do have a lot of colours in here, but predominantly I picked things out of my stash that were orange, yellow, red, all those sort of sunset kind of tones. And I think maybe if you went for a whole rainbow of colour, then that might muddy up a little bit. I don't know, I'm not an expert, but that's just my thoughts. And that was the recommendation from Tracy when she recorded her video, was just to try and pick a bunch of fibres that had some sort of commonality to them. And yeah, as I say, I'm pretty pleased with how my spin is turning out. I'm recording this in mid-December. My wheel's going to take a little vacation, a little holiday for a week or so as we have family visiting. But I will be eager to get back to this spin in the new year. I think I still have about 600-700 grams of fibre to spin up, so there's a long way to go. But I think I've spun up enough and taken you through the beginnings of my journey to be able to post up this video. I will come back for sure once my spin is complete and show you all of the yarn in its entirety, but I would imagine that will be another few months yet. So I think that is everything for this video. If you've got any questions or you want to see anything in particular, then please do leave comments below the video. As I have mentioned in a lot of my videos, I am in no way an expert. I'm still a fairly new spinner in the scheme of things. I've only really been spinning on my wheel this year, so I can only offer you insight into my experience, and I'm not trying to put myself across as any sort of expert at all. There are definitely much better, much more experienced spinners out there. So yes, with that caveat, ask your questions. I'll be happy to answer anything that I can. So yeah, I'm going to wrap things up for this video. I hope you found something that is useful or enjoyable in the content here, and I hope that until we see each other again, you get to do some of the things that you enjoy. Until next time, great big woolly hugs to you all. Bye for now.